Margaret was an animal lover who took her passion for dolphins to unbelievable limits. She had sexual encounters with a young adolescent dolphin, and this relationship would kill the dolphin and leave her with terrible memories. This is the tragic true life story of Margaret Howe Lovatt's sexual encounters with a dolphin. Margaret was born in St. Thomas, U.S. Virginia Island in 1942. As a young girl, Margaret was always charmed by animals, and her fantasy about them was fed after she read a book called Miss Kelly, which was about a cat who could communicate with humans. From then on, Margaret's mind was filled with questions like, what if humans could understand animals better? Are there possibilities of higher level of bonding and intimacy? Her desire to find answers to such questions would motivate her to do what no one would anticipate with a dolphin left under her care. In her 20s, Lovatt made a move to the Caribbean island of St. Thomas, and by some weird twist of fate, her new home was only a stone's throw away from a research laboratory funded by NASA, where dolphins were studied. So Margaret found herself a new hobby. After her daily activities, she would spend hours observing dolphins and return the following day with the same enthusiasm. Her passion grew to the point that she just wanted to spend more time in the laboratory. The only way she could do that was to find a way to work there, and she did. At first, Lovatt was only able to work there as a volunteer because she only had a little science background. However, as time went on, the director of the laboratory, Dr. Gregory Bateson, was impressed by the young lady's dedication, and he didn't hesitate to give her a job. Lovatt was living the dream. Unbeknownst to her, things would take a dramatic twist on the job, a dramatic twist that would lead her to have a sexual encounter with a dolphin. John C. Lilly was a neuroscientist who also came to the Caribbean island laboratory. Like Lovatt, he was also interested in dolphins. At that time, he was working on his new research lab, which was funded by NASA and the United States Navy. He hoped that by the end of this research, he would figure out a way to communicate with extraterrestrial life forms. Although this didn't happen, he sparked up a relationship with Margaret. He met the 23-year-old volunteer when he was building a dolphinarium, a flooded dolphin house. This was the first piece of his puzzle. Of course, the young lady was taken by the doctor's research idea, and soon she would become his assistant. There were 3 dolphins, Lovatt recalled: Peter, Pamela, and Sissy. According to her, Sissy was the biggest dolphin who dominated the pond. Pamela was the reserved and fearful one, while Peter, the dolphin she developed an entanglement with, was young and was sexually coming of age. They tried to make the animals mimic sounds through their blowholes, but this was not working. So Lovatt volunteered to move in permanently to monitor the dolphins, hoping that developing a better bond with the animals would create a higher chance of success. Unfortunately, Dr. Lilly and everyone at the lab totally misread the limits of this bonding. First, Margaret would try to get them to pronounce human-like sounds, just the same way a mother teaches language to a growing baby. While she was having significantly good progress with the other 2 dolphins, young Peter was too distracted to focus on his lessons. She would also try to change the pitch of her voice and take the words more slowly, but this was not working out either. Being a scientist in a frantic search for a breakthrough, John was always away on research trips with his first wife, Mary. They would tour around the Caribbean on hired sailboats looking for interesting animals to observe. So, most often, it was just young, naive Margaret and her 3 dolphins. Often she would hit a dead end and would have no one to share it with but a report book. So one of those days, she decided to take matters into her own hands. According to Lovatt, she could only get the dolphin to make the hello sound, and when she tried to add Margaret, it became so difficult for the young dolphin, and he could barely make it past the sound, without making bubbles.
M is very difficult. My name, hello Margaret, I worked on. And M is just impossible. But he eventually rolled over so that it kind of, he would bubble it into the water.
Margaret.
She even made Peter take his speech lessons twice a day, but nothing seemed to be working. Maybe it was time for a new solution. Peter was new to his sexual urges and was in the process of getting himself to adapt to these new body changes. So often in the separate water pool where he trained with Margaret, he would rub himself on Lovatt. If I was sitting here, he would come up and look at the back of my knee for a long time, she narrated. He wanted to know how that thing worked, and I was so charmed by it. Margaret told interviewers that as this progressed, it was getting even harder to get Peter to return to the general pool, as she had always isolated him for training. So maybe the time was calling for a different approach. I wasn't uncomfortable as long as it wasn't too rough, she shared. In the beginning, I would put him on the elevator and say, "You go play with the girls for a day." Why didn't Peter have all this fun with the female dolphins? Well, according to Margaret, this was difficult to incorporate, probably because Peter was not very fond of them, as he spent most of his time with Lovatt. So she would reluctantly decide to manually assist the dolphin with his sexual urges. It was just easier to incorporate that and let it happen. It would just become part of what was going on, like an itch. Just get rid of that scratch and we would be done and move on. Lovatt described the whole process as an act of getting to know Peter better. It was in no way sexual for her. It wasn't sexual on my part. Sensuous, perhaps, she debated. It seemed to me that it made the bond closer, and that really was all it was. I was there to get to know Peter. That was a part of Peter, and she was right. Her bond with Peter the dolphin did get deeper, but something unexpected happened that would lead to the end of that bond, and the end of the life of the dolphin too. John was getting impatient with the dolphins, as he had expected that after all these years, there should be basic progress in deciphering the dolphin's language. After being introduced to the LSD drug, which was capable of stimulating and intensifying thoughts and emotions at a Hollywood party, his first thought was, how could this help with my research on dolphins? So, Lily would join a small group of scientists licensed by the government to research the drugs, giving him access to it in mass quantities. It took pleas from Lovatt to stop him from trying it on Peter, but he did test it on the other dolphins, and fortunately, it had little to no effect. But once John's new carefree attitude towards the dolphins was noticed, the funding stopped, and they had to relocate Peter to a confined Miami lab. It was a heartbreaking moment for both the lady and the dolphin, but there was little any one of them could do. A few weeks after their separation, Lovatt received the most shocking news. Peter had committed suicide. Dolphins are not automatic air breathers like us. It takes careful effort from them to breathe. And when life gets too tough, a dolphin would often take a deep breath and sink into the water. Peter obviously couldn't handle the misery of separation from Margaret and would decide to end it all by himself. Lovatt was unhappy and also relieved by the news that Peter would not spend his last days in the confined Miami cage. He wasn't going to be happy. He was just gone, and that was okay. She would continue at the St. Thomas laboratory even after the failed experiment. Margaret got married to the original photographer who worked on the research. They shared 3 kids and made the Dolphin Point Laboratory their home. Margaret has kept this experience a secret for over 5 decades and just recently started granting interviews. And this is how a relationship with a dolphin got this complicated. Now it's your turn. Have you heard about Margaret and Peter the dolphin before? Do you have any fond memories of the big brain mammals? Let us know in the comments, and while at it, give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and hit subscribe for more videos like this. Thank you for watching.